Welcome back to part 2. Here I am putting on a stencil on one side of the guitar. It says "Life is Beautiful." I used the aged brass wax through the stencil. It looks beautiful. And then on the other side, I used part of a stencil that says "Capture the Good Times." Same wax, aged brass. And you have to be really careful that you don't smear that. Please ignore those little pieces there that it would not let me delete. Again, I suck at editing. I'm so sorry. Anyway, we've skipped a few steps, but here we are decoupaging the back of the guitar. We put on our decoupage medium. This is an A1 fiber paper from Redesign with Prima, and I'm using a blue tool to get out any wrinkles or excess decoupage medium to squeeze it out to the sides. It's essentially a squeegee, if you will. So I'm using that to, squeeze anything out. I really, again, you would think I would have learned from the first side, and these are things I know. I should have painted the back of the guitar white to make our image pop, but call it lazy, call it being a rebel. I didn't feel like doing it. This guitar took so stinking long between my working around the sunflower on the other side and just all these little techniques, that I just didn't want to do it. So I didn't. So you can see our design was lost. So here's my workaround. I got out the Gilding pen, which I do not regret. I love this Gilding pen. This was my first time really, really getting to play with it. So the design, I ended up bringing out the design per the Gilding pen, I believe. Let me know what you think, but I think it turned out okay. So I basically just took this Gilding pen and found any of the design elements that I could and traced them. I might have ad-libbed a little bit. I might have added a leaf or two here or there. But for the most part, I followed their lead. And you can see some of the designs on there. Some of them were pretty faint. Some of them I had to fake. But again, if I had painted the guitar white in the first place, I wouldn't have had to do any of this. But it might have still been a pretty effect. So I might have to try some of my leftover A1 fiber paper from this on a white background and still use the Gilding pen and see how that looks. Just, to satisfy my curiosity. And I'm not sure that I ever mentioned that when I put this decoupage, this A1 fiber paper on, and I did also seal it and let it dry very well. So this has been decoupaged on and decoupaged over and dried. I did start to use the Gilding marker at one point and it wasn't quite dry, and it does not go over it real well when it's still tacky. So I wanted to make sure and tell you that. And I keep calling it a Gilding pen. It's a Gilding marker. So I wanted to get that right too. So yeah, it's a Gilding marker. Okay, now we're going to pick up some waxes and go around the outside. I've picked up one of the coppers and I'm going around. I've been around the outside and now I'm kind of going over the Gilding marker a little bit in places with it. It's kind of how I started out. And then I went in with some of the peacock, thinking I would go around it a little bit on top. And then I started kind of going outside the lines, and then I started going on the background. Next thing you know, I had a brush and I was going all over with it. So, and there you can see I'm taking the aged brass and going around the outside some. And then I realized, you can see it's really light right there. I had sanded off, when I sanded off the fiber paper, I had actually sanded off too far. So I had to get out some of the black gesso right there and covered that up. And then I, had to touch up a little bit more of it because I had actually sanded a little too far in a few spaces, which, happens when you start sanding. So sanded that back and dried it, and then started putting the aged brass wax on around that edge again. You can see how bright that is again. Like I said, I used that aged brass for so much of the details on this guitar. And then you can see I had like a 1-inch brush, just barely any on there, almost like a dry brush with the wax. And sometimes I would have one color on there. Sometimes I would have the peacock and the copper on there and have like dual colors, sometimes even 3 colors on there. And, maybe even, the copper, the aged brass, and the peacock. So you can see I'm just filling in any kind of blank spaces that I thought needed a little jazzed up. And I kind of went around the words on the sides. And then I came around to the front, and then I went towards the bottom where we had our rice paper, which I may have said earlier was from Decoupage Queen. If I did, I apologize, because it was actually Decoupage Central, which that will be in the supply list. I will have it correctly in there for sure. But I did even do a little bit of wax on top of the rice paper there. I did also use some aged bronze in places. And there you can see use some of the peacock, which is the turquoise in there. But there was times if I thought it was too bold, I would use the aged, I think bronze age was the brown one that would tone things down if I needed it to. And then here I'm coming in on that Sweet Dahlia is the flower. I'm going to use some black glaze and just tone that flower down a little bit to get it a little grungier to match everything else. I just didn't think it was quite dark enough because I had used it, I had done it with resin, and I had used the metallic mica powders in the mold before I poured the resin to get it to look the way it does before I put the glaze on it. So anyway, I think that's probably where this is going to end here real quick. So it's probably going to cut me off, but I think that is just about the end of it. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I enjoyed the heck out of making this one. This one was so good for my creative soul.